is your gold medal winner.
Everybody's wondering, well, when is this kid going to falter?
I didn't feel welcome in diving. There was homophobia. Some of my teammates were calling me fag.
Had he been a straight athlete, he would have made millions.
I was HIV positive.
The best diver in the world is going through all this.
I just wanted to hold the blood in.
My name is Louganis. I'm gay, and I'm HIV positive.
They'll say, an Olympic gold medal is worth millions. That's not the reality. Sometimes you have a good month, sometimes you have nothing.
He reinvented himself.
I'm sharing my experience, sharing what I learned, one step at a time.
So it's my pleasure to bring in via Skype Greg Louganis. Hello, Greg.
Hi.
Greg, I could talk to you for 2 hours, much less 15 minutes, about your athletic bravery in 1988 when you hit your head on that diving board. I remember it as a young, then unknown Gotti Epstein.
It's a bad day at the office.
Yeah. Well, you had a couple good days after that. What people don't know is as you were winning your third and fourth gold medals in that Olympics, is that you weren't, you were a hero to Americans and around the world, but you weren't able to be, to express who you really were. Can you talk a little bit about that, the early days of that kind of conflict?
Yeah, so being on the dive teams, traveling internationally, there was always the debate on whether who was going to room with the fag. And I mean, they should be so flattered. But anyways, it was challenging. And you know, looking back after so much time has passed, and you know, reconnecting with a lot of those individuals, I think that it was more about jealousy than homophobia, because I was winning at the time. And so, you know, it's hard to kind of really put your finger on it. After '84, I signed on with a very large talent agency, and they asked me to tone down the gay thing, which basically I interpreted as, you know, not necessarily going back in the closet per se, but just, you know, it was my policy not to discuss my sexual identity with members of the media. And I figured, well, everybody's entitled to a private life, and so that's how I kind of conducted myself. So, you know, I was true to the people who I was close to. It wasn't until '94 at the Gay Games in New York that I came out publicly, because I knew that my book was coming out the following year in '95. And I had another coming out to do, and that was about my HIV. So it was kind of a process, and I was grateful that I had people surrounding me during the process of the book breaking the surface, like my co-author Eric Marcus, my editor Mitchell Ivers. They were wonderful, because I knew my sport. I kind of joked that I spent most of my life underwater, so I didn't know what was going on in the world, and really didn't pay a whole lot of attention. And so they gave me a real wonderful education in being able to meet a lot of other gay authors, Armistead Maupin, and at the time Paul Manette, of course Larry Kramer, and many others who kind of gave me kind of the history of LGBTQ civil rights in America. So it was an interesting process.
Right. Well, you were a pioneer on both for your sexuality and on the issue of HIV. But as this documentary on HBO goes into, you paid a personal price for that, financial price. Could you talk a little bit more about that, about the business world? You got a little bit into it with the, when you signed in 1984 with the talent agency, but it didn't stop there, right? I mean, the costs added up for you. Yeah.
Well, it was rumored that I was gay, and there was plenty to read between the lines and in articles that were written. I really wasn't. I was on the beginning of that commercialization of the Olympics. I would have to say, who came before me, Mark Spitz, and at that time, Bruce Jenner, now Caitlyn Jenner. It wasn't, and then after 84, there were so many wonderful stories after 84 with Rowdy Gaines and Nancy Hogshead Makar and Tracy Ruiz. I mean, there were so many incredible stories. Edwin Moses, Ellen Ashford, Carl Lewis. But the advertising people just embraced Mary Lou Retton. So so that was interesting to see, kind of that process. But I think some of it we did have morals clauses in our contracts. And that's the reason why when I was with Speedo, my contract was going to be up in 94. My book was going to be published in 95. And at that time, the CEO was Linda Wachner. And Linda said, we want to extend your contract. And I said, Linda, we got to have a talk. And so I was doing a signing for them in Connecticut, and she had me out to her house. And I said, look, I'm gonna be writing a book, and you need to know about this because I know there's a morals clause, and I'm coming out about my sexual identity, but also too about my HIV status. And she was mostly concerned about my health and well-being, and because she had lost so many friends to AIDS at that time. And seen many of her dear friends and loved ones die homeless, and just the stigma that was surrounding HIV/AIDS. I mean, we've come a long way now. Yeah. So we've come really, really far. I mean, even the CDC has come out and said as long as you're undetectable, then there's virtually no way you're going to transmit the virus.
Right. And speaking of coming a long way, I mean, we're now more than 20 years later. You have sponsorships. You're doing this thing with Red Bull. You're back basically with endorsements and this kind of profile, public profile. Can you talk a little bit about the change in the business world's attitudes over that time and when you started seeing an evolution in that?
Well, I think that we've come a long way. We've got a lot further to go as well, and that is bringing corporate America up to the forefront. I mean, I had the opportunity to talk to General Motors and Dow and a lot of Fortune 500 companies that are very much very sensitized to diversity and also becoming, much more educated about sexual identity. A lot of people don't realize how much they talk about their wives and their kids and their families and all that. And here so many LGBTQ people are kind of are afraid to share those things for whatever possible ramifications there might be. We do have further to go. I think that corporate America is getting on the right path of stepping up. And now in sports, it's finding those agents and managers that know how to navigate those paths. As you know, we've had Matthew Mitchum, Olympic gold medalist in Beijing from Australia. He came out while he was still competing. Tom Daly, we have Tom Daly now, and Gus Kensworthy and Adam Rapon. So it's, and those are Michael Sams. There's a lot more awareness and sensitivity to that. We do have a long way to go. Challenging with this administration, I must say, but but it's possible. I think the one thing that has happened, it's kind of galvanized a lot of these people who feel marginalized to come together and support each other.
Right.
Whether they be Muslim, women, people of color, LGBTQ. So, I think it's kind of pushing us to be advocates of each other.
Right. Well, some of corporate America is in this room, and I wanted to give them a chance before we let you go to ask a couple of questions. Is there anyone in the audience here who would like to ask Greg Louganis a question? Let's see. Anyone? Making sure I don't miss anybody here.
Don't be shy enough for everybody.
They're a little shy. Let me ask you whether you feel like in this kind of evolution, where there's still a long way to go, you've taken some lessons, and you could offer some lessons to the corporate America that's in this room and who's watching on the live stream about what they can do to kind of advance awareness on these issues.
I think that we're seeing that, unfortunately, in with everything that's going on with the U.S. Olympic Committee and women's gymnastics and swimming. So it's just like being a voice, being an advocate, not backing away from that. To stand up for what's right. Don't be afraid to let your voice be heard. Because otherwise you're colluding in the abuse.
Very good point. And we also have someone who is going to speak up right now and actually ask a question. Can we get a microphone over to him? Thank you, by the way, in advance before we get going for taking the time with us today.
Right.
Oh, sure.
Actually, I'd like to ask you that, having declared yourself gay, and how did you cope with the HIV? Because it's a deadly disease, and how did you cope with it?
Well, it's becoming manageable. My viral load is undetectable. My T cells have never been higher. I advocate early testing, early treatment. Also, with regard to my treatment and health and well-being, I subscribe to both Eastern and Western medicines. I see an acupuncturist and Chinese herbalist once a week, and then I'm also on, basically cocktail of medications, and also, when my book came out in '95, I was a long-term survivor, and now I was 35, and now I'm 58. So now I'm a long-term survivor, which also brings up new issues, new challenges for the LGBTQ as well as the HIV AIDS populace that were aging. And I mean, I didn't expect to be here. I didn't expect to see 30 when I was first diagnosed. Then when I was in my 40s, I realized, oh my God, I'm going to be here a while. I got to get a job. So, I mean, I got to pay my bills. I got, so it was crazy. And I was actually talking to another long-term survivor, and it was like, well, oh my gosh, I didn't expect to be here. So, I mean, now what is my purpose? And I've been very blessed that I've been able to be a part of various projects, different plays, Jeffrey in New York, which was a blast. I played Darius about gay dating and dealing with HIV/AIDS. Also, I was in a movie called Touch Me, and I was the one character who was HIV negative. And so it was, in dealing with those, telling those stories, it's really, really, it has been very impactful and meaningful for me. And also being able to talk to you all today is just incredible. And opening that conversation, I'm going to be talking to the Minnesota Vikings next month, I think. And so there's a lot of people who, just need to get a little nudge into getting that conversation going. And then you realize how many allies you actually have, because unless they speak up, you don't know that they're there.
Right. Well, you've certainly done that today, nudged the conversation forward. And I think you have shown that you found your purpose as well. Thank you, Greg Louganis. Real pleasure speaking with you.